Hey, this is Alfred from Campus to Canton headquarters, and we are walking you through these exciting spring games happening this Saturday. So check out the video from earlier where I talked about Boston College and Liberty. It kicked off early this morning, and then we have a couple afternoon ones that are of note. Starting with a really important team for college fantasy at the very least, and that's Purdue Boilermakers, who last season, between two quarterbacks, with Aiden O'Connell being the most getting most of the snaps, but Jack Plummer got a few. And in total, 567 attempts for 4,576 yards. That would have been about a top three passing offense in terms of volume. It had it all been from one QB. Now, like I said, O'Connell took most of those snaps, and he was still a top 10 producer in terms of yards on the college side. Presumably he enters as the number one this year. He was pretty good last year. And so, he is important, probably picked up off waivers in terms of on your college side, should you be in an existing league. But if you're in a startup, don't forget Purdue, often overlooked, I think, as a tremendous college side producer. Now, I don't know much about his pro prospects. I haven't heard much about his pro prospects. But certainly on the college side, he's going to give you, I don't see why not top 10 production again. O'Connell, he was the starter. He will be the starter. Second in line was Burton, coming over from UCLA. He had one career start at UCLA. That was against Oregon State. He's kind of a dual threat. He rushed for about 65 yards in that game against Oregon State, threw a touchdown to Kyle Phillips in that game. Otherwise, kind of an unknown guy. He got the second kind of line of usage at Purdue. Then we had Alamio, I believe he's a he's a third-year player, and then Brady Allen, the kind of guy who rose up a lot of the recruiting boards this year, true freshman, enrolled early, and he was the fourth QB in line. So this is Aiden O'Connell's team. There's no question about that. And then it's next in line, maybe Burton, although Alamio looked good to me. I saw a couple of clips and was able to watch him a little bit. Nice strong arm. He ran in for a 1 yard on a bootleg, ran in for a touchdown. So I'd keep an eye on him. He's kind of interesting guy, but that would be for the future. This year, it's O'Connell barring injury. So we know he's going to produce. We know that offense is going to produce a lot of yards, at least through the air. But what about on the ground? Been pretty unfruitful for the last 3, 4, 5 years under Jeff Brom. King Doerue is the guy who got the first 3 looks in the backfield. He had kind of involved in the first 3 plays of the scrimmage. He had a target and 2 carries. He gained a first down. That's small potatoes, but it does show me he's running as kind of like the running back one, and that makes sense. He's been there a while. Was kind of in a committee with Xander Horvath, who went to the NFL. Although King has never averaged greater than 4 yards per carry, he does have 2 seasons with more than 20 receptions. So that's kind of interesting. He's always been used as a receiver, even as a true freshman, but never been an efficient runner. Of course, this team, this offense has never really been an efficient running offense. They also brought in Samson James as a 4th-year transfer from Indiana, where he really didn't do a whole lot in his seasons with the Hoosiers. He's a bigger guy, 6'1", 220, maybe used as a hammer in short yardage situations. But he ran, kind of in tandem with Doerue today and had, from what I can understand, had a few nice gains. I wouldn't expect much for James, another guy who even at Indiana did not average more than 4 yards per carry. That's really, really bad. I mean, we've got 2 running backs here who have never averaged more than 4 yards per carry in any season in their career. I don't think this running game is really worth investing in at all. Maybe King Doerue, if he's going to get 20 or 30 receptions this year. Otherwise, stay away. Can't really glean anything interesting from the backfield. Now, we've got a Purdue offense that's high volume, returning quarterback, veteran guy, and we don't have Rondale Moore for the first time. He was an NFL rookie last year, but for years we had Rondale Moore, and then we had David Bell, and they overlapped a little bit to have Bell and Rondale Moore, 2 exceptional receivers for the Boilermakers, and now Bell is gone too. This is huge. I know vacated targets are kind of a very floppy stat. We can't really assume things, but when you're talking about like guys who commanded 100 targets, Bell had 95 receptions, I think, last year. Like that is so much that really does have to go somewhere. I think it gets tricky when you're like, oh, these three receivers who, combined for 60 total receptions, that means somebody has to get 60 receptions. I think that's silly. When you've got like the clear funnel wide receiver one, and this offense is going to throw it a lot, they're going to throw it to somebody. Now, will one person get all those? Probably not. But there is a lot of opportunity in this offense. It's going to matter for college fantasy. It's going to potentially show out for future NFL. If a young guy pops on Purdue, then that's going to be really interesting. We saw it happen with Bell. We saw it happen with Moore. So who will it be? I think it's a little bit tough to say. I know you're coming here to say, well, you're supposed to tell me. So Tyrone Tracy is very, very interesting. He is a guy transferred over from Iowa, where we know their offense is really kind of gross, especially through the air. And so he transfers over to Purdue. I think he potentially will be unlocked this year. He's an interesting high school running back prospect who converted to wide receiver at Iowa. Now he's up to 6'1", 205, so very stocky, thick build. And he did line up at running back today, for the Boilermakers. And they've had this position for a while now. First, it was Rondale Moore getting 30 to 50 carries in a season, and additionally receptions. Then when Moore went down, they kind of used this guy, Jackson Anthrop, who would get, 3 to 5 carries a game in addition to some receiving work. And now it looks like it's going to be Tracy. The word out on the street is that they want him to be 6 to 8 carries a game, kind of in that Anthrop / Rondale Moore role. Now, I think he might be a little better than Anthrop, but probably not as dynamic as Rondale Moore. I think he could very much matter for college fantasy this year. Tyrone Tracy, number 3, he was targeted and used early and often. He caught at least one TD pass, I think, from Alamio, and a really nice play where he got some separation down the field and was able to haul in actually a pretty nice dime for a touchdown. And a lot of talk about this guy Tracy for Purdue. So after wallowing in kind of obscurity for Iowa, although he was second on the team in receiving for Iowa as a true sophomore, then kind of just disappeared. But that offense is so easy to just disappear when you're a receiver. So I think it's definitely worth taking a look at Tracy in your college fantasy drafts on the college side of a C2C. I bet you he is not rostered. And so keep an eye out for Tracy. Milton Wright would be another guy. I didn't hear much from him today. That's totally fine. He is kind of been second in command. Yes, last year he should take a bigger role, you would think. But Tracy coming in as a transfer could end up being like the biggest player here. So we'll have to take a look there. But between Wright and Tyrone Tracy, I'm not sure I want anybody else really. Payne Durham is a tight end. Again, he didn't do anything today. I'm trying to keep up with the names from today, not go through the depth chart. So who made noise today? And another guy was Zion Steptoe. This is a true freshman enrolling early out of the state of Texas. Now, he was a 3-star guy, not really highly recruited. I think he was beyond the top 100 receivers on 24/7. But he's 5'11", 180 listed. He got a target early on in the game. I think on the second series, he was already being targeted. So maybe running with the 2s, maybe mixing in with the 1s as a true freshman. You'd love to see that. He caught a touchdown from true freshman Brady Allen later in the game, the third quarter. So he did get on the board. He was being used. You like to see that. Anytime you hear a true freshman making noise right when they step on campus, you need to take notice. Again, I love 3 stars from the states of Florida and the states of Texas. Those are great things to look for. One of the first things, if you see a guy making noise and then he was some under-recruited guy from Texas or Florida, I'm like, okay, check. This guy's a guy to pay attention to because those guys do fall through the cracks. There's so much talent in those states that sometimes you can find a gem, and they're usually from one of those states. I looked at his tape because I wasn't really familiar with him. Even when I dive into the 3 stars, he didn't really pop for me. as a name that I looked at, but he looked good. He looked technically sound. I saw some nice moves up the line on his tape. Didn't look like a burner, but did have some passes deep. Texas high school football, almost no matter what, is worth noting. So it wasn't even, major Texas high school football. His teams were pretty bad, to be honest with you, like losing teams, losing records. But he was, as a junior, led the team in receiving. As a senior, he actually didn't, which is a little bit funky. But you never know if there was injuries mixed in or anything like that. And then they didn't have punt returns on the stat page on Max Preps, but I do know he had a nice little punt return on his junior tape. So sometimes these high schools don't even keep stats for those kinds of things, returns and whatnot. So it's hard to say, but he did have a punt return on his tape. And that's something I look for in these prospects, especially the lower ranked guys. Were they dynamic? Were they used all over the field, punt returns, etc.? So Zion Steptoe is a guy that you will be able to select. Probably goes undrafted. Maybe you take him in the 45th round of a C2C draft. These drafts get so deep. It's just a name to circle. If he's around and it's the 45th round, why not take a guy who could do something early? And there's tons of production available at Purdue. Let's move on to Cincinnati, the premium G5 team in all the land. Made the playoff last year. Desmond Ridder, Alec Pierce, and Jerome Ford gone. So the entire offense is going to look different. But it's a fruitful offense, and we know that Desmond Ridder was a good college producer, dual threat guy. And so everyone's been wanting to hear Evan Prater is going to be the starter. Well, he did start this game as the QB1 in the first half. He came out. He threw a quick strike to Tyler Scott for a 40-yard touchdown pass. He threw another touchdown pass later in the game. Looked pretty good. I think he's a fine college quarterback. If he starts for Cincinnati, great. I think you can take him. I think you can probably start him. He's going to be a dual threat. He's absolutely athletic. Personally, I don't love his arm motion. It looks kind of funky. I'm not sure if it's super repeatable, and I don't know about his NFL upside. However, good to know he's going to be potentially the QB1 here, although some commentary after the game said, Ben Bryant, who was a transfer from Eastern Michigan, I think, came in. He opened the second half, so he was kind of like the starter for the second half. But I think Prater is going to be the guy. It just seems like he is the biggest upside, and then played well today. I mean, he didn't make any tremendous mistakes. He didn't look terrible or anything like that. So I think he played well enough. If they're thinking of him as a starter, I would imagine he will be, although, they're playing it close to the vest. And Fickle came out and said, well, we got two guys we really like, blah, 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 coach speak. But it seems like Prater is your best bet. And I think it makes sense from a fantasy perspective and from an upside perspective there. I couldn't find any clarity on running back today. Ryan Montgomery's been a guy who was running behind Ford, but there was almost nothing today. Multiple reports, multiple Twitter feeds, no clarity on running back. Like, I couldn't even find anyone mention like so-and-so got a carry that looked nice, a nice carry, anything like that. So unfortunately, I can't help you there. I am so excited. Shimon Mater went ham. He was one of my favorite athletes coming out of the 2021 cycle. He was 6'5", 220 athlete out of the state of Florida. Again, these under-recruited guys out of Florida and Texas, pay attention. He's now apparently up to 6'5", pushing 260. That's NFL size. He might have, if that's the case, he gained 40 pounds since his last listing as a high school senior, which is tremendous. He is a jumbo athlete. Someone who was at the game said he was one of the most athletic guys on the field at 6'5", 260. Like, sign me up. This guy is what you want out of a athletic, humongous tight end, converted receiver, tight end now. He had 2 touchdowns, one from each of the starting quarterbacks. So he was not running with the twos. He was running with Prater. He caught a 35-yarder from Prater and another one from Ben Bryant. He was catching passes from the top 2 quarterbacks who are in a battle to be QB1. That means he was on the field with starters. He is going to be a redshirt freshman. He's got multiple years. Target this guy in your drafts. He's going to be way late. I was talking to someone today who's in the 17th round and like, oh, who's a tight end I can take a stab on? At this point, after what happened today, take a stab as early as the 17th round. I mean, a lot of the other tight ends are gone. They're pretty much a crapshoot anyway, but this guy is checking all the boxes you want for a, out of nowhere super stud in terms of athleticism, size, and what you want from a fantasy producer. Shimon Mater, I'm so excited that he has popped so early. I was expecting like year 3, maybe even year 4 for some of these guys that convert basically from being a receiver, but holy cow, big game. And you read some of the write-ups and he's on the map. I mean, everybody's talking about him in the Cincinnati beat writers. So, the cat may be out of the bag already, but I don't think the fantasy leagues are going to catch up right away. So startup drafts, target this guy. And that does it for Purdue and Cincinnati. Some really interesting storylines out of spring camp. Stick with Campus to Canton. We're going to keep doing these little updates of spring games as they roll through.